Listen to me. You need to get out of this place.
When I was like 12 or 13 years old, I remember suddenly seeing these faces everywhere. I came from a sheltered household growing up, so on one hand, I wasn't allowed to play these games, and on the other, merely seeing this imagery was enough to give me nightmares, very vivid ones. It's been almost a decade since then, and in that time, Five Nights at Freddy's has sold millions of copies and spawned a whole new genre of video game. The jump scare-ridden, lore-heavy let's play fodder we all affectionately call Mascot Horror. Think Baldi's Basics, FNAF, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Poppy's Playtime, or even stuff like Choo Choo Charles or like, I don't know, Granny. But now in 2025, I have noticed a growing trend as opinions on these games start to shift, and people have started to heavily criticize pretty much every aspect of these types of games. Do these kinds of games still matter? And if they do, why? What makes them interesting? And to begin with, what even denotes something as mascot horror? How do we define the genre? Mascot horror is a distinctly modern subgenre of horror, primarily in video games characterized by a central, marketable antagonist, recognizable, often corporeal character who, with some sanitization, could easily be the mascot of a children's media franchise, and frequently is within the game's own story. Popularized by the seismic impact of Five Nights at Freddy's in 2014, the genre leverages the subversion of childhood innocence as its primary engine for fear, obviously contrasting the cartoonish, kid-friendly aesthetic with darker, often violent underlying themes and storylines. These antagonists, be they animatronic entertainers, forgotten toy line figurines, or corrupted cartoon characters, whatever. They serve as both the source of in-universe terror and also just kind of they're the face of the game's marketing and branding itself. The genre's DNA is a fusion of several prior trends, the slasher films of the 80s, the creepypasta games of the early 2010s. But while slasher villains like Freddy Krueger are generally very overtly monstrous, mascot horror villains retain a vestigial semblance of their original child-friendly purpose. Generally speaking, there's a single mascot or a group of mascots who act as the iconic antagonists of the game. There are heavy allusions to and corruptions of recognizable childhood media, products, and establishments from the 80s to the 2000s. Although sometimes they mix it up a little and go further back. Following FNAF's blueprint, deep lore is often buried in environmental storytelling, hidden audio logs, or game files, and this lore typically reveals a backdrop of corporate negligence, supernatural tragedy, or even family trauma. And another huge thing that I've been noticing is a heavy, often mandatory reliance on jump scares as a primary mechanic, which usually results in an instant game over and then you have to start over from a checkpoint. While it was born in indie video games, the genre's influence has bled into other mediums. Certain analog horror series, particularly those inspired by FNAF's lore-heavy corporate tragedy format, can be considered a narrative extension of mascot horror. In essence, mascot horror is a genre built on a foundation of ironic or almost comic contrast. Cute versus corrupt, familiar versus frightening, childhood joy versus adult trauma. One could kind of look at it as a product of its time, leveraging internet culture, nostalgia, and kind of the marketability of Let's Plays and similar YouTube formats to create this unique and accessible thing. You might notice how often I'm reiterating the commercialization part of this, and it segues perfectly into part one. Oh, also I forgot to mention, I have a pretty girl behind me so that those of you with no attention span can pay attention. Part one, the problem. Okay guys, before you come at me, I am opening with negative stuff because I think that this genre is vitally important to horror gaming and to horror as a whole. So while we're starting with the things that I and others as well seem to think could be improved, later in the video I am going to even out the playing field. Okay, sound fair? Okay, awesome. Let's address the actual gameplay. To be totally blunt, to me, the core gameplay loop of most mascot horror right now is a creative dead end. The genre is notoriously and often lazily dependent on the jump scare, like it's a carnival haunted house. The formula is very predictable. Wander through a dark environment, listen for audio cues, and wait for a loud noise and sudden monster face to fill the screen. It's a cheap biological trick that triggers a startle reflex and not any sort of genuine fear. And then in addition to not really getting under your skin, after the first few times, it just starts to get really annoying and frustrating, which I guess that could be part of the fun. The template has been copied so relentlessly that it has, over time, become cliche. The gameplay just sort of devolves into a repetitive cycle of simple, uninspiring puzzle solving that functions as filler between scripted encounters. Walk here, press a button, static sequences where the player crouches in a locker or under a desk waiting for some threat to pass them, and then scripted chase sequences that test repetition and memory more than any sort of skill or ingenuity. And all of that together transforms what could be a nightmare into a glorified on-rails walking simulator where the main punishment for failing is a loud, repetitive animation. And I'm not even trying to say that jump scares are inherently bad, because they're not. They're a tool. My criticism is more that for much of analog horror, it's the only tool in the box. The game sacrificed dread and atmosphere for an easy payoff. And it's not just the gameplay that's getting repetitive. It's everything. Everything is overdone and nothing feels unique to someone already familiar with the genre. The market is saturated with copycats. Like, hey, imagine a game with an abandoned, family-friendly location, like a pizza place, a toy factory, or a theme park, and somewhere inside is a cast of once wholesome, now murderous mascots with a twisted design. Throughout the game, environmental storytelling is told through scattered notes or audio logs about some sort of tragic incident. You play as a nameless, voiceless protagonist through gameplay consisting of puzzles, hiding, and jump scares. Sound familiar? And for every one game that tries to do something interesting with the formula, there's a dozen, like Garden of Banban, that are just transparent reskins of old ideas, to the point where it almost feels like it's a parody of the genre. And a lot of these types of games feel like they function more as content engines than games, designed to be packaged into YouTube thumbnails and theory videos and let's plays. You could almost say that the genre became a victim of its own success, self-cannibalizing the core concepts until the thing that was once novel is now very predictable. My point is, asset-flipped, algorithmically designed products that are built to ride a trend and not to expand or elevate it or do anything interesting with it don't just hurt the individual games that they come from, they devalue the entire genre, making it harder for genuinely creative entries to be taken seriously. But let's not kid ourselves, because for a significant chunk of Mascot Horror right now, the game isn't really trying to be creative or taken seriously. It's a glorified commercial for the merchandise. Merchandising. Instead of a terrifying game that creates demand for cool merch, we are frequently seeing now marketable character design first, game hastily built around it second. It's like they're focus tested to be plushie ready. It's like the teeth need to be scary, but not too sharp. You gotta think edgy, cute. We need those to look good on a backpack. This profit-driven motivation sabotages the games themselves, obviously. Why invest a budget in innovative mechanics or good art or writers for storylines when the real money is in vinyl figures and t-shirts and stuffed animals? At its most cynical, the narrative exists to provide just enough lore to fuel wiki pages and fan theory videos, which in turn function as free advertising to keep the merch machine running. And it's just, I don't know. It's all very gross. And that's barely scratching the surface of my least favorite thing about these games, the narrative laziness or just dissonance throughout the whole thing. Instead of weaving the story into the fabric of the experience. They will often stop the game dead in its tracks to give you a 10-page memo or rambling audio log that info dumps the backstory. Or it'll feel like they had a cool idea on how to hide or obfuscate cool lore, and then in addition to making it easy to get just completely lost as to what is going on, that might just be because I'm stupid, but they also seem to forget to make the lore cool at all in the first place, which it's funny how that works. It's just an inefficient way to convey plot, seeming to prioritize quantity of information over quality of the delivery. It's like the designer is borderline writing a wiki entry for game theory, which is, it's a fine concept, it's really, really overdone. The horror games that stuck with me the most are narrative driven with well-written characters and real emotions being drawn out of me. Like, imagine if the entirety of Mouthwashing was just that one really janky hide and seek sequence with the giant horse head in the dark room with all the bottles, and then you learned the basic story of the game through a 3-minute audio log or a 5-page manuscript, like the captain's logs. Like, wouldn't a lot of what made the game impactful be lost? Then also the stakes in the games are practically non-existent, because there's the gameplay loop of get caught, you see a jump scare, and then reload from a checkpoint, which there's really not any consequences or sense of a deteriorating psyche of the main character. You're not even really losing resources, you just start over. Okay, so I've been ranting for a minute, and obviously all this stuff is just my opinion, but it seems like a lot of it is something that a seasoned horror fan might roll their eyes at for more reasons than just the gameplay. But that's an idea that we haven't been over yet. That word. A seasoned horror fan. For a lot of people who are my age or a little bit older, the thing that makes these kinds of games spooky is the subversion of nostalgia. Here's a cartoon character, now they're evil. Analog horror does this a lot too. But while the original Five Nights at Freddy's game was definitely intended for like an older demographic, I don't really think that the space Mascot Horror occupies by and large today is intended for the same people. When I see clips from Garden of Banban, I immediately think this is likely targeted towards a younger audience made up primarily of children. And that's where my personal gripes with the genre just kind of melt away. And so we take you to part 2. It thrives regardless. And that's a good thing. Okay, that wasn't too bad, was it? It was not. Now here's where I think the big issue lies. Adults are talking about these games, saying that they're not extreme enough, they're too simple, they're too repetitive, whatever. But I envision a world where both adult horror games and scary, spooky stuff for younger audiences can both exist at the same time. Us idiots over here just keep categorizing fundamentally different types of games together as the same thing under a genre moniker that really hasn't been widely adopted by the gaming industry anyways. It really doesn't fit. It's more a description of the characters of the game than an actual description of a type of game. I mean, let's face it. A lot of kids are going to seek out scary stuff. It's kind of a rite of passage, I think. I mean, not for everyone, but I grew up sheltered and religious and eventually went through a phase where I first got into horror as a younger teenager. I loved cosmic horror novels and the Saw movies, even the really bad ones. Saw still holds a place very near and dear to my heart, despite the fact that like half of those movies are very hit or miss. The question isn't whether or not teens and tweens will explore horror. The question is what are they going to find when they do? In the unregulated jungle of the internet, what they could find could easily be graphic, traumatizing, and psychologically intense material that was intended for adults. And to me, that's why Mascot Horror is the candy cigarettes. It acts as a gateway. These games, with their cartoonish violence, familiar settings, and cool monsters all provide the thrill of being chased and the tension of a jump scare without the extreme gore, sexual content, or deeply disturbing psychological themes of more mature titles like Silent Hill or mouthwashing or what have you. You'll remember that I called these series horror with guardrails earlier, and that I think that's hitting the nail on the head. A kid can be scared by the concept of a haunted animatronic bear without being exposed to scenes of visceral mutilation or profound existential dread. Dismissing Mascot Horror as not real horror just misses the point entirely. Its purpose isn't really to satisfy a jaded veteran, it's to create new jaded veterans by serving as a fun and easily accessible time, ensuring that the next generation of horror fans can enter the genre, enter the scene gradually. And also, just to make sure that no one misunderstands, I don't mean this to sound condescending. There are many, many adults who also play these games. I more just want to say that I appreciate Mascot Horror still today in 2025, even as some others seem to be heavily criticizing it, because they're really important for getting more people into our genre. Screw gatekeeping, you know? And then while on this note, retroactively, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for some of my previous points. Yeah, a lot of these games are simple and railroad players or give them limited agency or choice. But by doing so, it makes the games more accessible for younger audiences by having simple controls and puzzles, and it allows the game to pay off the railroading with very cinematic moments and scares that can get absolutely terrifying. That's the trade-off. That's kind of the social contract you're accepting by playing this type of game, you know, a walking simulator. While I, the Daniel Profeta, personally enjoy more narrative or character-driven storylines and plots, the fact that these games often have extensive lore is half the fun of playing them, leading to massive groups of fans banding together online to try and figure everything out. There's ongoing discussion and shared experience and fun, creative, crazy theories that all tie together, adding years of lifespan of relevance to these specific games. I think that I'm in the minority, actually. Most people seem to really enjoy the lore discovering and the audio tapes and the clues that reference back to other games that were released almost a decade prior. You know, that one image of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia putting the pins in the map and looking like a nut job. I've had people reach out to me before and ask me why I don't get into more hidden lore and theory stuff on my channel. Why I tend to prioritize theme and character analysis and like descriptive retellings of stories, and it's like, that's just what interests me personally more. In my opinion, the most serious criticism that can be levied against the genre is the ethical concern, where lines of what's appropriate are getting crossed. Because these games and the YouTube content around them are aggressively marketed to younger people, using characters and aesthetics that pull directly from their world. Toys, cartoons, colorful animals, and that line is crossed when the marketing deliberately obfuscates the mature nature of content to exploit a young audience's curiosity. It's the difference between a Halloween haunted house that's openly advertised as being scary, or a Chuck E. Cheese that suddenly locks all of its doors and has evil animatronics appear to scare kids. I feel like a lot of Mascot Horror properties operate in an ethically gray area, using childish aesthetics as a Trojan horse for mature and often poorly handled themes, and that has a certain responsibility to it, which is unfortunately why we've seen a resurgence of Elsa-Gate style videos using characters from like Digital Circus or Poppy's Playtime, etc., etc. But my response to all of that is, how is that the game creator's fault? If anything, YouTube made a YouTube Kids app and allowed disguised fetish content on it. I don't think the creators of Garden of Banban are to blame. Parents need to be monitoring their kids, and all the companies and payment processors and what have you that try to dictate what people spend their money on, or try to sanitize the internet, or try to police people's thoughts or the words that they say. All of them can accept the responsibility whenever something bad happens. And honestly, I hope people sue the shit out of them. Like, if they want to play God and say there's nothing we can do about it, maybe they should hold themselves to God standards. But I'm getting off topic now, so I digress. Let's get back to the main thing we're talking about. I look at a lot of these games and see a foundation of appreciation being built for younger newcomers to the genre. And I think that while these games can sometimes feel stagnant or overly dependent on genre tropes, ultimately it's a good thing that more people are interested in the coolest type of media, scary media. Obviously, I'm biased. I think horror is awesome. My entire channel is about it. Each like on this video equals one new amendment to the US Constitution. If you want, let me know what your amendments would be down below in the comments. But also, YouTube recently made a new feature called Hype, which can make smaller creators with under like 500,000 subscribers get pushed by the algorithm more. I don't really know how it works yet, but as a test, you should try to hype this video if you want. Also, let me know if you'd watch anything else from me about these types of games, or if there's any under the radar ones you think I would like more. We are Legion, thanks for watching.